Welcome, America. We've got Governor Johnson here to have a discussion on various topics. And Governor Johnson has a lot of experience, for most people probably know, but he was eight-year governor of New Mexico, reelected overwhelmingly, cut the state budget, turned a deficit into a surplus, and now he's running for president to do the same for America. Governor Johnson?
Great. Thank you very much. I guess we'll just, Clark is with us this evening, Clark Cooper from Washington, D.C. Clark, great to have you on. But I guess we can get started here. Sherry Hooper, going to start off with what's your favorite all-time Christmas melody? I guess it would have to be 12 Days of Christmas, just because I enjoy seeing if I can carry all 12 days with one breath at the very end. I guess that's why I like it so much. That's the first question. I've been saying the last several days that I hate to paint in broad brush strokes, but I think the majority of Americans describe themselves as fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And I think I fall within that category, broadly speaking. And I think that's a message that really is about equality more than anything else. As President of the United States, I am promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I'm promising to veto legislation where expenses exceed revenue. I say this from the standpoint that I believe that we're going to experience a monetary collapse unless we actually fix our spending. So this is really to save the country. The notion that people will go without, I think that that needs to be answered with doing with a little bit less is better than doing with nothing at all. And I think that's what we're going to end up with unless we address this. And then lastly, as President of the United States, I am promising to advocate throwing out the entire federal tax system and replacing it with the fair tax, which in my opinion would really reboot the American economy for the next 100 years. No income tax, no corporate tax, no more withholdings from our payroll check. It would make American goods and services 23% more competitive. And if in a zero corporate tax rate environment, the private sector does not create tens of millions of jobs in this country, I don't know what will. So let's see. Clark, you got some statements here you'd like to start off with? Thank you so much for joining this evening.
Well, Governor, yeah, thank you for having me. And log cabin members in New Mexico have a very important question for you. Red or green?
Green. And for those that don't know what that means, that's red or green chili, and that's a question that gets asked to you when you dine in New Mexico at any Mexican food restaurant, red or green, and I'm always the green guy.
All right, excellent. So that was actually emailed by some members in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. I thought there was some consistency there that that you had to answer on that one first start.
You know what, Clark? I'll also add that as governor of New Mexico, I vetoed a bill that made that the state question, and I vetoed that bill because what are you as legislators doing? Taking hours worth of time to debate a bill on whether or not it should be red or green. So I vetoed that legislation, trying to set a precedent that how about spending your time in meaningful ways as opposed to a law red or green chili.
And speaking of spending time on the floor, your take, Governor, on what's happening right here in Washington. You talked about the fair tax. A lot of folks here on this forum know that you were a major job creator when you were governor in New Mexico, and that there was a budget surplus when you left office. A big frontline issue here, not only with our members and log cabin Republicans across the country, but what's happening on the radar screen is the legislation that's coming before Congress next week. The middle class tax relief. There's a package of bills that are tied to that. That's unemployment insurance, some job creation initiatives. It seems, finally, this is where they're moving away from talking about postage stamps and coins, which is the congressional version of the red or green state motto issue. But would love to hear more. I know our members are myopically focused on what's going to be potentially a battle royale next week on regarding middle class and taxes.
Clark, I really think that if we want to do away with lobbyists in Washington, that we need to enact the fair tax, which really does away with all existing federal tax, does away with the IRS. I think that Washington has its hand out, and when I say Washington has its hand out, I think politicians have their hands out for groups or individuals or businesses, corporations that pay for special loopholes, pay for a special place in line that makes this country unfair, as opposed to equality for all. And I think what government can provide is a level playing field, and that with our existing tax system, really what we've done is we've created an unlevel playing field that what I'm hearing coming out of Washington really is perpetuating this, a continuation, if you will, rather than getting at the heart of this, which is tax reform that I advocate should be the fair tax, that I believe it is, as the name implies, it's fair. The more money you make, the more money you will consume, and it will also promote savings. It's one thing for us to borrow money for the money that we don't have. It's another thing to print money, which is the problem that we do have. About over the last year, up to 70% of the money that we're spending for ongoing government expenditures are literally money that's being printed out of thin air. And the result of that, at some point in the future, is going to be inflation. In my opinion, at some point in the future, it will be a monetary collapse. And a monetary collapse is where money ends up being worth nothing. And it's not anything that's going to be announced. A week from Thursday, we're going to have a monetary collapse, so go out and spend all the money that you have now on goods and services, because that money won't be worth anything next Thursday. Next Thursday is just going to end up happening unless, in my opinion, we balance the federal budget and make real inroads in cutting spending.
So, Governor, you're suggesting, and you're not the only one, we have some big allies in our organization. Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, for example, is a huge proponent of the balanced budget amendment. But it sounds like you're describing an apocalyptic kind of Weimar Republic scenario that could befall us at any given time.
I believe that. I do believe that, and it's not predictable, and I don't believe that we're immune from the mathematics of continuing to spend more money than what we take in. I just think that we need a bolder approach to tax reform in this country, to job creation, and now I'm back to the fair tax. If in a zero corporate tax rate environment, the private sector does not create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know under what scenario they will do that. In New Mexico, I had a great record when it came to job creation, but my response to that when I was governor was, you know what, government doesn't create a single job. What government can do, and what I think it did in New Mexico, is that there was a certainty when it came to rules and regulations. And then when it came to laws being passed, I think business in New Mexico went to bed knowing that it wasn't going to get any worse, and that proposals were really on the table to make things a lot better. I think that same certainty could exist in Washington today, and I'm just going to say that I don't think it exists. A balanced budget amendment is not the answer if the balanced budget amendment is something that's going to happen in 15 or 20 years. Balanced budget needs to happen now, and that's back to my promise, is to submit a balanced budget to Congress, promising to veto any legislation where expenditures exceed revenue, And yes, they'll have to override my veto, but I just suggest that spending will be lower in that scenario than any other possible scenario that you could present.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't know if you've seen, there's questions about the debates. As you know, the folks on this forum are big supporters of getting you into the debate formats, and that's been a frustrating issue for you. Have you been invited to the Trump debate?
At this point, I have not been invited to the Trump debate, hoping to get an invitation, and I see that's a question here from Charlie Froman. At this point, I've not been invited to any of the other remaining debates. That's something that we're really pinning our hopes on, is to be able to get in the remaining 5 debates. I have been excluded from 14 out of the 16 debates, and I think that has had a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you're not in the debate, how are you even a candidate? It's really hard to raise money when the person on the other end of the phone says, hey, Gary, I like you, I like what you've got to say, but I'm looking at a poll here where your name is not even on the poll. That has really been hard to overcome. I think the Republican Party could have really stood up and said, look, if you're going to have as a criteria showing a certain percentage of votes in XYZ poll, that at a minimum, Johnson should be in XYZ poll as opposed to not being in XYZ poll and having XYZ poll determine whether or not you're in the debate or not. That's just not fair. Herb, you're up. And I am not hearing Herb, but I do have the text here. Do you believe in getting rid of the IRS and the Fed? And if so, how long do you think it would take? Herb, regardless of whether or not it happens or not, I think that you have to have a president that's going to advocate doing these things. So ending the Federal Reserve is something that the president should advocate. Eliminating the IRS, throwing out the entire federal tax system, throwing out the income tax, throwing out withholdings from your payroll check. I think, and I base this on my experience as governor of New Mexico, I think when you advocate the right things, that public opinion, the dialogue, the discussion, the debates that go along with your advocacy of things that are right end up making change in the long run. That was my experience as governor of New Mexico. I can't promise that any of these things are going to happen if elected president, because it would require legislative cooperation. But what would the American people be shouting if I were elected president? They would be shouting that we want tax reform. They would be shouting that we want a balanced budget. I think they would be shouting that we want somebody that's going to have starch in their underwear to veto spending that exceeds revenue.
On that theme, Governor, you've probably seen some other questions down here that are follow-up to what Herb is asking, and some of them do touch upon generationally. A number of log cabin members are Generation X or younger or millennials, and we often hear in forums concern about the ability, the solvency of entitlements. And so back to what you're talking about, a balanced budget, and everyone sharing the so-called shared adversity or shared burden. Your thoughts about reform. I know that you have positions out there, but I don't know if everyone here is familiar with where you stand on entitlement reform.
Very good. And let me just address Jared LaRocque's question here, text question first, which is, would you have a full audit of the Federal Reserve? Absolutely. What is needed when it comes to the full Federal Reserve is just full transparency, and an audit would provide that, in my opinion. Abolishing the Federal Reserve would bring about 100% transparency. We need to stop printing money. That's really the crux. And by balancing the federal budget, we still might have to print money, but by enacting the fair tax, I think that that's going to promote savings to the point where perhaps the printing of money goes away. I am promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013.